I know the death and resurrection are sensitive areas for people who have given weight to and are putting their concepts of their own future on this clothesline. So I'll just throw in a few perceptions and try not to disturb your deeply accepted reverie. Imagine, just for comparison, if I had decided to dissolve that bullet in my pal Abraham Lincoln's brain, whose intelligent work changed destiny for the world. The telegraphs were already sputtering out the news of the attempted assassination. Reporters were scrambling to get to the Ford Theater area. Newspaper presses were warmed up, waiting for information. Lincoln had got out of bed, kissed his wife's teary cheek, stretched that great frame of his, and asked how the play ended. Secretary of War Stanton, present when Lincoln revived, contacted his cabinet colleagues and for security's sake decided to keep this fantastic event a secret only among themselves and a few associates. Lincoln disappears from public view, and people didn't read until years later what had transpired. Of course, if I used the same plot formula and I had Lincoln ascend into heaven, the cabinet members would have wanted it to be a private event. Is this hard to swallow? Well, I just want you to think about it. This event would have made all the papers, and in Jesus' case, the scrolls, the town criers. Once this miraculous invulnerability had been displayed, a guy whose feet had been spiked to a cross, walking around like nothing happened. Well, there should have been no fear of reprisals. The whole Roman Empire would have been impressed. The synagogues would have accepted a lot of resignations, and the recruiting stations for this new religion would have been overwhelmed. Wasn't that the goal? Let's open our minds and picture the actual situation. This new religious effort could cause a great upheaval in the politics and religious power of the Hebrew nation. The Roman conquerors who had cooperation set up were quick to squelch any form of civil strife. So they made an effort to stop this religious rebellion while it was still small. The guys with the power terminated the ringleader and were going to hunt down all the remnants, starting with the disciples, and snuff them out. The evening after the crucifixion, the disciples got together in their secret hideout to figure out how to get out of this mess. It was dark in here, but they left the lamps unlit. Look, guys, this is an awful day. This is the worst day of our lives. They killed Jesus, and all he did was talk. And they'll be coming after us next. Those Roman sons of mongrels will be watching every gate. There's a lot of people know us, and that's not a good thing. I love that guy, but Christ, what a mess he left us. Peter stops talking, clenches his teeth, and seems to study the far wall. maybe those people could help us here. Listen to this. My cousin, you remember Hammond, he knows Lucius Antecas, the evening two-guard. I think he'll let us slip Jesus' body out and bury it somewhere. We'll need to hide out for a few weeks. Then we can start telling people. He did come back to life. He was always talking that way. We'll just act like it really happened. We'll describe his dropping in, talking about how his wounds are doing and like that. Tom, you say you touch the wounds to see if they're real. Then we'll say we even saw him ascend into the sky, took the chair next to God. Come on, Pete. How you gonna get anyone to believe that? Hey, now spit it out, Lukey Lou. You got a better idea? You just want to turn yourself in and get tacked up? You got any idea what they do to you? Well, what have you got to lose? Peter was getting louder and gesturing wildly as he talked, and noticed Matthew frowning at him like he was losing it. Okay, Matt, you want to tell me what's on your mind? Matthew looked intently, tightened his mouth. People that I know are going to want proof. Peter pointed his finger at Matthew. Here it is, and pay attention. Those crowds always listened hard when Jesus talked that eternal life stuff. We dangled the promise of eternal life at him. We convinced them that Jesus came back, and he promised it can happen to them too. This burg is full of Gentiles, so we'll say even the Gentiles can get it. But they gotta have faith. Faith. And they gotta accept this story to get it. Hey, I know people. Everyone is scared to death of dying. Even the ones who don't totally swallow it will go for it, just in case it's true. I think it's a sure bet, but doggone it, it will not work unless we all act like we believe it and act like we know. There was a moment of silence. At first, they stared at Peter in disbelief. Then all looked at each other with furtive, desperate eyes. It was an option that could work. All they needed was a few thousand people, an initial peaceful groundswell, to get the authorities to back off. As this story suggests, the body was taken to a deserted sector, a roofless ruin of a building surrounded by trees and shrubbery. Although it was against Judaic tradition, this was a time for drastic action. Fires were commonplace in this community, so they decided to set the body to a respectful funeral pyre. As the rolls of smoke lifted to the night sky, Peter was inspired to see his dear friend's essence rise into heaven. The shroud, having been in contact with the myrrh-saturated body, was left close enough to the pyre to react, as spirits of myrrh are slightly flammable. It was folded and put away by Luke as a final remembrance. As morning light changed the sky, and the fire was but smoky ribbons laying close to the ground, the unidentifiable bones were carefully placed in a basket and eventually given to the family, where they were properly but privately buried. To their amazement, Peter's plan started to work. They got their support faction outright. It just came too late for some of them. The rest escaped into obscurity, having put their embroidered recollections on secret scrolls. As I said earlier, I'm just offering an optional possibility. I won't ruin your dream by saying for sure this is a true story. It's just good to consider all the alternatives. It doesn't matter to me what you believe. You think it over. You decide.